Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are genuinely thrilled to have you with us today because the materials we are looking at are going to make your head spin.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, our mission today is to unpack a single, highly detailed, and frankly, kind of chaotic source. We are pulling apart this massive transcript from a YouTube video by the investigative channel Glow Rumor Wave.
Which is quite the rabbit hole.
It really is. The video attempts to document one of the most staggering true crime cases in recent memory. So we are going to sift through this mountain of data to pinpoint the exact moments where a tragic, seemingly straightforward abduction investigation just completely fractured overnight.
It's a masterclass in how a narrative can flip on a dime. I mean, we are looking at a situation that begins with all the hallmarks of a standard heartbreaking ransom scenario.
Right.
But as you dig into the data, almost in real time, it morphs into this sprawling corporate conspiracy. Having all these disparate pieces of evidence laid out really changes how you interpret every single forensic detail.
Absolutely. And to properly set the scene for you, we need to lay out the foundational facts exactly as they're presented in this transcript. We are tracking the abduction of an 84-year-old woman from her home in Tucson.
Right.
Now, right at the top, there's this very bizarre anomaly in the documentation that we just, need to address and move past.
Yeah, the naming quirk.
Exactly. The video initially refers to the victim as Nancy Guthrie, and even briefly claims she's the mother of the Today Show host, Savannah Guthrie.
Which is wild.
Right. However, almost immediately after that, the entire remainder of this very extensive transcript exclusively refers to the victim as Margaret Hayes.
Yes.
And it explicitly connects her to a massive corporate entity called Hayes Broadcasting. We are treating the material exactly as we found it.
Yeah.
But for the sake of clarity, and given the overwhelming bulk of the evidence, we will be referring to her as Margaret Hayes.
Which is a perfect example of the kind of chaotic, real-time information environment you have to navigate with digital investigations like this.
Oh, for sure.
But if we look past that initial naming quirk, the reality on the ground for law enforcement was incredibly grim. At the start of this timeline, we are 17 days into the search for this 84-year-old woman.
17 days. That is an eternity in a missing persons case.
It really is. The Pima County Sheriff's Department was hitting an absolute wall. Their single best lid was a piece of suspect clothing seemingly purchased from a local Walmart. That clothing yielded a DNA sample. Investigators ran that sample against roughly 22 million profiles in a national database. And the result? 0 matches.
Wow.
An absolute dead end.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because you essentially have an investigation that is effectively dead in the water. Law enforcement is completely stumped and the family is in sheer agony.
Right.
The documentation paints this incredibly vivid picture of the public-facing side of this tragedy. You have the son-in-law, a man named Daniel Cross.
Yes, Tim.
He is standing out there in front of a sea of flashing cameras, holding his wife Victoria's hand. He is visibly weeping, pleading with the public, saying, "I would give anything to bring her home." It is the absolute picture of a family destroyed by a random act of violence.
That image is vital to hold on to,
Yeah.
because that specific public facade is exactly what shatters next.
Completely shatters.
The turning point in this case, the precise moment the entire narrative inverted, happened at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. An anonymous account dropped an audio clip online.
And it was short, right?
Incredibly brief, just 43 seconds long. There was no manifesto, no long explanation attached, just a simple, highly specific caption that read, "This is the 2:13 a.m. call."
Just that.
Just that. For about 12 minutes, the internet barely registered it. But then an audio engineer downloaded the file, ran it through some basic enhancement software to isolate the vocals, and the internet completely exploded.
Let's reconstruct exactly what was on that 2:13 a.m. phone call. The transcripts note this call was placed on a private, encrypted phone.
Which is huge.
Right, which immediately elevates the level of sophistication we are talking about here.
Yeah.
The first voice you hear on the tape is male. And what stands out is that he is completely calm, totally controlled. He simply asks, "Is it done?"
Then a second voice comes in. The audio analysis describes it as distorted, heavily muffled, but clear enough to make out the response.
Yeah.
The second voice replies, "They're waiting for confirmation." There is a distinct beat of silence on the recording. And then the first, calm male voice comes back and issues a direct command. "Move the 5. No delays."
Move the 5. No delays. It is chilling.
But beyond being creepy, I really want to talk about the psychology of that phrasing.
Go for it.
The tone is not someone negotiating with ruthless kidnappers while their mother-in-law's life hangs in the balance.
Precisely. The linguistic breakdown of that specific clip highlights a panic-free, controlling tone. This is an executive managing a transaction.
Yeah.
Move it now. No delays. It is an operational directive.
Yeah.
And that word, 5, is the crucial variable that unlocks the financial side of this investigation. It wasn't just a random code word. Right. It connects directly to the money trail. Exactly 8 minutes after that 2:13 a.m. call ended. At precisely 2:21 a.m., $5 million was moved out of corporate accounts.
8 minutes.
But what I find so interesting is the mechanics of that transfer. It wasn't just wired in one massive lump sum. The data shows it was deliberately broken into 3 highly specific fractional transfers. 2.1 million, 1.7 million, and 1.2 million. Can you explain why someone would structure a transfer like that in the middle of the night?
In financial forensics, that is a textbook layering technique. If you wire $5 million at once to a foreign entity, you immediately trip automated compliance alarms at almost every major banking institution.
It's an automatic red flag.
Exactly. By fragmenting the capital into seemingly arbitrary amounts, 2.1, 1.7, 1.2, you are trying to slide just under the algorithmic thresholds that trigger an immediate freeze.
Makes perfect sense.
Furthermore, this money was routed to 3 separate shell corporations located in Zurich. And the critical detail: it was routed through a consulting branch that is directly tied to Daniel Cross's international holdings.
The weeping son-in-law on television.
What's fascinating here is Daniel's reaction when the financial press confronted him about this the very next morning. His immediate, reflexive instinct was to attack the audio leak. He claimed the tape was fake, completely fake.
Literally.
But he was backed into a corner by the digital paper trail of the money. He actually had to admit that the $5 million transfers happened. His defense was to spin it as routine restructuring. Let's really think about that. Routine corporate restructuring. Executed at 2:21 in the morning, fragmented into Swiss shell accounts on the exact night after his family supposedly received ransom instructions.
Moving $5 million to Zurich at 2 in the morning, that is essentially like trying to quietly sneak a grand piano out your front door while your house is surrounded by a police barricade.
That's a great way to put it.
It defies all logic for a legitimate business operation. And the public wasn't buying it. A forensic linguistics expert was brought in by an independent journalist to analyze the leaked audio. They stated there was a 78% match between the vocal signature in that 2:13 a.m. call and Daniel Cross's public speeches.
Right.
For our listener who might be wondering, 78% doesn't sound like a perfect match. Why is that number actually so damning?
It's a great point, because we are conditioned by television to expect a 100% voice match. In reality, a 78% match on a highly compressed 43-second encrypted phone intercept is incredibly high.
Because the audio is so degraded.
Exactly. Forensic linguists aren't just listening to the sound of the voice, they are analyzing spectrograms. They look at formant frequencies, which are the acoustic resonances of the human vocal tract. They look at speech cadence, micropauses, and how specific consonants are aspirated. Achieving a 78% biometric alignment across all those complex variables on a degraded recording pushes the realm of coincidence to near zero.
And the internet recognized that immediately. Suddenly, the hashtag 5 million call is trending worldwide.
Yeah.
You have this visceral side-by-side contrast dominating social media. Daniel weeping at a press conference, cross-cut, with the audio of him allegedly saying, "Move the 5. No delays."
It is a PR nightmare.
It's a devastating blow to the public narrative. But the leaked 43-second clip wasn't actually the whole story.
No, it wasn't.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The source material details that an extended version of the audio eventually surfaced. And this extended cut introduced a third voice that shifts this from a cold financial crime into a deeply unsettling family betrayal.
This is where it gets dark.
Extremely dark.
Yeah.
Underneath the static, there is a female voice. It is barely a whisper. The female voice asks, "What if they find out?" And then says, "You promised this wouldn't go this far."
Yeah.
And the calm male voice responds, "They won't. She doesn't know enough."
It is the pronoun. She doesn't know enough. Not they, referring to the kidnappers or the police. She, referring to Margaret. The internet instantly zeroed in on that female whisper. Amateur audio analysts started pulling the audio apart. They compared the cadence, the breath patterns, and the specific emphasis on certain syllables to past public interviews given by Victoria Hayes, Danier's wife, and Margaret's own daughter.
It is wild how quickly crowdsourced investigations move today. You had podcast hosts, former investigators, and thousands of regular people dissecting this whisper. And what was Victoria's reaction while the entire world speculated that she was on a wiretap orchestrating her mother's disappearance?
The silence.
Total radio silence. For 36 hours, while the hashtag third voice dominated global trends, she said nothing. When she finally did release a statement, it was exactly 3 sentences long.
I believe in my husband. The truth will come out. We are devastated. It is an incredibly legally insulated statement. It commits to nothing and answers nothing. But behind the scenes, the reality was entirely different. The documentation notes that the lights at their private mansion were blazing all night, and local law enforcement vehicles established a perimeter around the property for hours. The operational walls were closing in on them.
Which forces us to look at the underlying motive. If this wasn't an opportunistic kidnapping for a ransom payout, what was it? The transcript does an excellent job of reconstructing the 72 hours leading up to Margaret Hayes' disappearance. When you lay it out chronologically, the timeline is terrifying.
It fundamentally reframes Margaret not as a victim of happenstance, but as a woman who is actively closing in on a massive internal threat.
Let's walk through those 72 hours.
3 days prior to the kidnapping, Margaret reportedly held a highly secure, closed-door meeting with her personal legal team. The subject of that meeting was asset control.
Asset control.
Yes. According to leaked internal notes, Margaret was initiating the process to suspend Daniel's access to several high-value corporate accounts pending a forensic review. A former board member of Hayes Broadcasting anonymously confirmed that Margaret was furious, believing that massive funds were being quietly redirected without board disclosure.
So, 72 hours out, she is preparing to legally cut him off from the money. Then we move to 48 hours prior to her disappearance. Authorities confirmed that Margaret requested the raw access logs to an internal corporate audit file. The file was labeled Project Helix.
The elusive Project Helix?
Right. Now, the company officially denied that this file even existed. But digital archivists involved in the investigation claimed that the exact file she was looking for was accessed using Daniel Cross's executive logging credentials just hours after Margaret put in her request.
He was digitally monitoring her investigation into him. And that brings us to the final 24 hours. A former private security contractor stepped forward on a live stream and revealed that he had been hired to install heavily encrypted private surveillance inside the Hayes residence the previous year.
Inside the house itself?
Yes. He stated that the night before she vanished, there was loud, aggressive shouting in the home. Arguments specifically centered around money and operational control, and he distinctly heard Margaret issue a threat. She reportedly said, "If I go down, you're coming with me."
That is massive.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the entire architecture of the crime shifts right before our eyes. This transforms from a desperate ransom situation into a highly calculated corporate silencing. Margaret wasn't targeted because she was wealthy and vulnerable. She was removed from the board because she had become an existential liability to whatever Project Helix was hiding.
And the digital footprints they left behind prove it was an inside job on multiple intersecting levels. The transcript drops 2 massive metadata bombshells. First, a cybersecurity analyst looked at the original leaked audio file. They discovered it didn't originate from a hacker breaching a criminal server. The metadata embedded in the file showed it was extracted directly from inside a federal evidence database. Let's really consider the implications of that.
It's staggering.
Someone inside the federal investigation purposefully leaked that audio to the public.
Which is a catastrophic breach in protocol. It suggests one of 2 very dark realities. Either a federal investigator believed the financial ties were being covered up by higher-ups and decided to blow the whistle, or someone with federal access was actively attempting to shape the public narrative and frame Daniel. Regardless of the motive, it highlights the absolute fragility of modern digital investigations. And the second metadata anomaly centers on the encrypted phone itself.
Yes, the phone used to make that 2:13 a.m. call. Investigators found that this specific device had been completely dormant for months. But it was suddenly activated and brought online exactly 1 week before the kidnapping.
The timing's perfect.
And the location of that activation is the smoking gun. It pinged a tower at a private executive airport lounge, the exact same highly secure lounge that Daniel Cross used before boarding flights to Zurich for his so-called investor meetings. Zurich, of course, being the exact jurisdiction where two of the three shell corporations that received the $5 million were legally registered.
The digital noose just tightens with every single data point. You have location pings, financial routing numbers, and vocal signatures all converging on one executive. And the fallout in the real world was instantaneous. You simply cannot have a scandal of this magnitude intrinsically tied to a major corporate entity without the financial markets reacting violently.
The stock plummeted, right?
It fell out of the sky. Hayes Broadcasting stock plummeted 11% in a single morning. As the audio leaks gained traction, it dropped another 18% before noon. Billions of dollars in market cap were wiped out in hours. Advertisers were pulling campaigns. Institutional investors were in a sheer panic.
The board of directors had to stop the bleeding. So at 9:42 a.m., they officially put Daniel Cross on temporary administrative leave.
Temporary.
They use the word temporary, but in the corporate world, a public suspension amidst a federal kidnapping probe is a death sentence for a career. If he was truly innocent, if this was all an elaborate fake smear campaign orchestrated by hackers, the board would likely circle the wagons. Instead, they cut him loose.
Completely cut him loose.
But the corporate boardroom was only the beginning. Shortly after the suspension, federal agents executed a physical raid on a downtown financial firm directly tied to Daniel's offshore management. They were carrying out boxes of physical ledgers and seizing servers.
And that's where they found it.
Exactly. According to the transcript, inside those seized hard drives, federal agents found heavily encrypted folders. The folders were explicitly labeled Helix Authorization Tier 3. I want to pause there. What exactly does a Tier 3 authorization imply in the context of corporate finance?
It implies a level of systemic control that overrides almost all standard compliance checks. In corporate architecture, a Tier 1 authorization might let you view accounts. Tier 2 allows standard operational transfers. A Tier 3 authorization generally requires multiple executive sign-offs, board-level clearance, and gives the user the ability to bypass standard auditing software to move massive amounts of unregulated capital.
Wow.
It is the keys to the absolute kingdom. And through all of this, the staggering stock crash, the board suspension, the federal raid on his offshore managers, Daniel Cross completely vanished from the public eye. For 36 hours, there was no emotional press conference, no angry legal denial, no carefully worded social media post. Absolute silence.
So what does this all mean? For a man who is literally standing in front of cameras, weeping every single day, to suddenly go completely dark when the financial questions start, that silence feels louder than any legal accusation.
Synthesizing all of this for you, the listener, this investigation is a chilling illustration of our modern reality. It vividly demonstrates how digital footprints, your server timestamps, your IP metadata, the microscopic formatting of your financial transfers, and the acoustic frequencies in your voice make it virtually impossible to orchestrate a massive crime in a vacuum today.
They always leave a trail.
Always. Every single action leaves a digital echo that can be reverse engineered. It forces us to confront a really dark reality. Margaret Hayes was almost certainly not the victim of a random crime of desperation. She was a casualty in a multi-million-dollar boardroom war.
That is the core takeaway from this entire source material.
This raises an important question, and it is perhaps the biggest anomaly in the entire source. Think back to the very beginning of the timeline. The original kidnappers, the physical operatives who supposedly took Margaret from her home, initially demanded cryptocurrency for the ransom.
Standard operating procedure for modern ransom.
Right. But internal FBI memos, which were referenced in the transcript, suggest that the kidnappers abruptly shifted their demands. They changed from untraceable, decentralized crypto wallets to highly specific, complex wire instructions. And they did this just hours after that 2:13 a.m. phone call where the male voice said, "Move the 5."
Which makes no sense for a street-level criminal.
Exactly. Requesting a wire transfer requires specific routing numbers, SWIFT codes, and the use of receiving banks that can easily freeze the funds if they aren't routed through pre-established shell companies. Why would street-level criminals change their payment method mid-operation to something so highly regulated and complex unless someone inside the global financial system was actively guiding them on how to move that money into offshore accounts?
It fundamentally changes the relationship. Were they paying off kidnappers, or were they coordinating an extraction team? It changes everything about how you view the crime.
It really does.
We want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought to mull over today, based on a single, isolated detail from the source material. After that massive federal raid on the downtown financial firm, a source inside the government leaked exactly one sentence to an investigative journalist regarding what was actually found on those seized hard drives.
Just one sentence.
Just one sentence. The source said, "This is bigger than a kidnapping." Think about the implications of that for a second. If Margaret Hayes didn't know enough, as the voice on that tape coldly claimed, and if her disappearance wasn't about extracting a quick ransom payout, but about permanently silencing her, then what exactly does Project Helix Authorization Tier 3 grant access to?
That is the real mystery.
What asset or what secret is so incredibly massive, so lucrative, or so deeply illegal that an executive would allegedly coordinate the abduction of his own mother-in-law just to protect it? And if this was indeed a planned, calculated corporate execution, masked as a tragic crime, who else on that board of directors knew about it? And perhaps most terrifyingly of all, who was next?
It's a question that completely redefines the boundaries of the entire case.
It certainly does. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it gave you plenty to think about.